At the end of this video, you're going to see what's going on in the figure with more clarity than you could before. Now that's a big claim. At the end of the video, leave a comment, let me know if we achieved that. We are going to look at the pelvis, this massive structure inside the figure. It's hugely important for the gesture, it's hugely important for the anatomy, for the forms, but it's also horribly complicated, right? The shape of it, it's like a nightmare shape. Now I have a little confession for you, right? Don't tell anyone, but I have a YouTube channel about life drawing and I'm making a video about the pelvis and I haven't studied the complex shape very much at all, right? And so we're just gonna bypass a lot of, like, what's that bit do? I don't know. We're gonna bypass a lot of that complexity and really focus on the things that are gonna help us to draw better. Just like we did with the rib cage, but we're gonna take even more liberties than we did with the rib cage. At least with the rib cage, what we learned kind of matched the shape of the rib cage, but we're gonna deviate even more. So you know the 80-20 rule, where for various things, 80% of the value, 80% of the benefit comes from just 20% of the effort or 20% of the work. In this case, it might be 90-10, you know? 10% of the information about the pelvis is going to give us 90% of the drawing benefits. So before the anatomy police come and arrest me, let's give you that 10%. The first thing to do is figure out what angle the pelvis is on. Is it angled like this, or is it flat and horizontal? If we're looking at it from the front, we're going to check the ACES points. So what are the ACES points? You can think of the pelvis as having an opening around the top. But the bony bit, the actual pelvis bone, doesn't go all the way around, right? So if you feel the front of you, it's kind of soft at the tummy, right? There's no bones there. But you come out to the sides, there's these bony bits here that kind of stick out from the pelvis. And those are the ACES points. Now, they are a little bit tricky to find sometimes. So I'm going to give you a whole set of clues to help you figure out where they are. So how do you find these ACES points? We need a few clues. Clue number one, sometimes they're really visible and easy to see. So that's great. But very often it's hard to figure out which of all the bumps and stuff we're seeing are the actual ACES points. So the first thing to note is that they are on the front outer corner of the torso, right? So what I mean by that is they're not going to be here where I've got these arrows on the figure. That's too far in, right? And they're not going to be here. Now we're out on the sides. They're going to be on the front, right out on the edges, on the sides of the front of the person before you get to the side plane of the person. Okay, so that's the first extra clue. The second extra clue is, well, how high up are they going to be? Are they going to be down here? Are they going to be up here? We can follow those diagonals from the crotch up, and they're going to direct us up to those ACES points. Another clue is that the crest of the pelvis, the top opening of the pelvis, the obliques, the kind of love handles on the back, and that kind of comes around the top of the whole pelvis, this kind of bulge, is going to be just above the pelvis, and it's going to come around and that's going to guide you right to these ACES points as well. So a couple of really good clues there, but sometimes we need more. So another thing to think about is, what is the pelvis doing? Can we figure that out, right? So if the person has their pelvis shifted to one side, it's often going to rotate with it that way, right? It's often, if it's coming out here, it's going to kind of rotate around. And so that might help us to figure out what angle we expect the ACES points to be on. Another thing we can check is the line from the crotch going up towards the belly button, like going up the middle of the torso. What angle is that on? Because that's going to tell us the overall angle of the pelvis. And we would expect the ACES points to be roughly perpendicular to that line. Another clue is the tops of the thighs. The ACES points are going to be just a little bit up from the top of the thighs. So for example, if the person is sitting or if their leg is raised, you can see where the top of the thigh comes up to. And then you just go up a bit, there's the ACES point. And then a final thing you can do is you can do the pose that the person is doing, try and match it, and then figure out where are those ACES points on yourself. You can feel them, these bony bits, you can feel them, and then you can figure out where they would be on that figure. So it's hard to figure out at first, but with all those clues, you should be able to find them every single time. And as you do that more and more, you'll be able to see them more and more easily, and you'll get to a point where you can just see the ACES points. What about from the back? It's actually a bit easier, I think, from the back. So you still have those love handles bulging out and stuff like that. You've also got the butt crack giving you an idea of the overall angle. But very often you're going to come up from the top of that butt crack and you're going to see these two dots. And those are the dots from the sacrum. And basically those dots just give you the angle of the overall pelvis. So that's a little bit easier to see. So we figured out what angle the pelvis is on, but now we can figure out, is it tilted forward or tilted back? And what I mean by that is, in a neutral standing position, the pelvis is usually tilted forward, in other words, higher in the back than the front. And so the crest of the pelvis, like that top opening of the pelvis, is normally slanting down from the back to the front. And so that's that forward tilt. Now the pelvis, you can roll your pelvis in different ways and make it tilt back or tilt forward even more, but that's what it's like in most poses. And the way that the glutes, right, on the butt come off the pelvis, and then the way that the abs come up off the pelvis as well, go with that overall angle of the pelvis, that kind of overall tilt of the pelvis. So this whole thing really, really works because this whole part of the figure seems to have this overall angle to it. And what's really nice is that is opposite to the overall tilt back of the rib cage. And so what we get is this really nice shape where you have on the front a big C-shaped curve, a big stretch, and then on the back a little bit more of an angle change. And we know from our gesture video, link below if you want to check it out, that kind of squash and stretch, that kind of big C shape against an angle change side is really nice for figure drawing. The next thing to do is figure out how that pelvis is rotated to our eyes. Like, are we looking straight at the front of it? Or are we looking at it from the side? Or maybe we're looking at it from a bit of a 3/4 angle. And if we are looking at it from more of a 3/4 angle, like, how strong is that angle? So one thing we can check is if we go from the center line to each edge, how much can we see on the far side of that line and how much can we see on the near side of that line? Another thing we can check is how much of the side of the butt can we see, right? So if we're looking straight at the front of it, we're not going to see much of either side of the butt. But if we're looking at it from a bit of an angle, we'll see a little bit of the side of the butt. And if we're looking at it from a strong angle, we'll see a lot of the side of the butt. And we want to check that. We want to note that and think how much of that center line, how much of the far side can we see and how much of the near side can we see? So now I understand how the pelvis is oriented in 3D space. I know its angle, how it's tilted, how it's rotated relative to my eyes. If it was a simple box shape, I could draw that box. I know everything I need to know about it. And that's actually something a lot of people do, is they just draw it as a box shape to get started. You go, the top edge is across those ACES points, and then you figure out how it's tilted to project the rest of the box out from there. And you can figure out how much of the side plane you can see versus the front of the box, because we know how it's rotated to our eyes. So a box is actually a really nice way of starting to draw the pelvis area. I personally like the pelvis pants, right? So the pelvis pants is something that we learn in our Fresh Eyes Challenge, which is a great way to learn about the basics of figure anatomy. And so what that gives us is a really simple 3D shape, which really maps to what we can actually see. It helps us draw the angle, the tilt, the rotation, and we can build our anatomy onto it pretty easily. But whichever way you choose, or you could draw the actual pelvis, like you could get into the complex anatomical shape of the pelvis, and you could draw that now because you know the angle, the rotation, the tilt, etc. Whatever way you choose to visualize and draw this pelvis area, the point is that the pelvis is a rigid mass. It's not bendy, right? So if I think about the hips, for example, and I've got the pelvis angled like this, well, the angle across my hips is going to have to make sense with that. It's not going to be that the hips are like this, but the ACES points are like that. It's all going to move together. I said earlier that the tops of the thighs are just under the ACES points. Okay, so if I've seen the pelvis is angled like this, then the tops of the thighs have to make sense with that. If I'm looking from the back, the sacrum dots give me the angle of the pelvis. Well, the bulges of the external obliques, which are above the pelvis, they now need to be on that angle too. And the bottom of the butt needs to make sense with the overall angle of it. It's tilted forward, then, you know, the way that the obliques are bulging out over the pelvis needs to have that tilt forward. That line from the crotch going up towards the belly button, that's going to need to make sense with the angle of the pelvis. Everything in this area is going to rotate and tilt and move and angle based on the pelvis, based on the things we just figured out. Now, what really matters is not so much the pelvis itself, but how it relates to the rib cage, right? So we figured out, based on the sternum, a really simple way of figuring out that rib cage egg. Now we figured out how to find those ACES points and stuff like that for the pelvis pants, or the pelvis box, if you like that idea better. I like the pelvis pants. So if we've got the pelvis pants and the rib cage egg related properly, like here's an angle change or here's a tilt change or whatever, and then we can squash and stretch the midsection between these two rigid masses, then we've pretty much cracked a huge part of figure drawing. We've figured out probably the most important idea in all of figure drawing. We have done more for our figure drawing than we would have done if we'd read and memorized an entire anatomy book. This is the heart of the gesture. It's also the heart of the forms, and the heart of the structure is the relationship between the pelvis and the rib cage. A couple of extra little things to note. The male pelvis is going to be a similar width to the rib cage, but you know, the rib cage is wider from the front view than it is from the side view. So if the person's twisting, for example, then the width of the rib cage and pelvis may appear to differ. But if you're just looking at them from the front, they're going to be similar in width. For a female figure, very often, but not always, the pelvis is going to be wider, the rib cage and shoulders are going to be narrower. So that's useful to note. Another useful common difference between male and female figures is that the obliques, which are just above the pelvis, they kind of bulge out, they might have some fat on them, and they create those love handle shapes. That bulge is often going to be more prominent on male figures. So often we're going to see the outline come back in, because it's kind of bulging, come back in for the top of the pelvis on the male figure. Whereas on the female figure, that often gets smoothed out so that it doesn't come back in the same way. It goes all the way from the waist, all the way around the side of the hips. So we talked about that 80-20 rule, and I think that anatomy is an area where the 80-20 rule really applies. So all you need to do is learn the most useful 20% of anatomy, which is what I'm trying to teach in these Anatomy-zy videos, to get 80% of the benefits. And it might be the 90-10 rule when it comes to anatomy for drawing. So I hope you're feeling the benefits of this series. Let me know in the comments below if we achieved that goal of helping you see the figure in a different way. We are going to do the Fresh Eyes Challenge, which really brings together all of these ideas and helps you not just understand them, but be able to apply them in your drawings. That's the goal of the challenge. It's more like a mini course, really. We're going to do that live in January. Check out the link below in the description for more information. There is a video on the screen. It's all about the rib cage shape. That plus the stuff in this video is like a huge chunk of figure drawing, so check it out.